Our transmitter is not powerful enough. The signal must be shut off at the source. We have...
Daddy, I have a headache.
Me too, honey.
I'm giving you a choice. Either put on these glasses or start eating that trash can.
I already am eating from the trash can all the time. The name of this trash can is ideology. The material force of ideology makes me not see what I'm effectively eating. It's not only our reality which enslaves us. The tragedy of our predicament when we are within ideology is that when we think that we escape it into our dreams, at that point we are within ideology.
This is a paradox we have to accept.
Put the glasses on! Put them on!
The extreme violence of liberation. You must be forced to be free. If you trust simply your spontaneous sense of well-being or whatever, you will never get free.
What?
Freedom hurts.
In the first year of the last decade of the 20th century, during my 30th year as a school teacher, in Community School District 3, Manhattan, after teaching in all 5 secondary schools in the district, crossing swords with one professional administration after another as they strove to rid themselves of me, after having my license suspended twice for insubordination and terminated covertly once while I was on medical leave of absence, after the City University of New York borrowed me for a 5-year stint as a lecturer in the education department, after planning and bringing about the most successful permanent school fundraiser in New York City history, after placing a single 8th grade class into 30,000 hours of volunteer community service, after organizing and financing a student-run food cooperative, after securing over 1,000 apprenticeships, directing the collection of tens of thousands of books for construction of private student libraries, after producing 4 talking job dictionaries for the blind, writing 2 original student musicals, and launching an armada of other initiatives to reintegrate students within a larger human reality, I quit. I was the New York State Teacher of the Year when it happened. An accumulation of disgust and frustration which grew too heavy to be borne finally did me in. To test my resolve, I sent a short essay to the Wall Street Journal titled, "I Quit, I Think." In it, I explained my reasons for deciding to wrap it up, even though I had no savings and not the slightest idea what else I might do in my mid-50s to pay the rent. In its entirety, it read like this. Government schooling is the most radical adventure in history. It kills the family by monopolizing the best times of childhood and by teaching disrespect for home and parents. The whole blueprint of school procedure is Egyptian, not Greek or Roman. It grows from the theological idea that human value is a scarce thing, represented symbolically by the narrow peak of a pyramid. The idea passed into American history through the Puritans. It found its scientific presentation in the bell curve, along which talent supposedly apportions itself by some iron law of biology. It's a religious notion. School is its church. I offer rituals to keep heresy at bay. I provide documentation to justify the heavenly pyramid. Socrates foresaw if teaching became a formal profession, something like this would happen. Professional interest is served by making what is easy to do seem hard, by subordinating the laity to the priesthood. School is too vital a jobs project, contract giver and protector of the social order to allow itself to be reformed. It has political allies to guard its marches, and that's why reforms come and go without changing much. Even reformers can't imagine school much different. David learns to read at age 4, Rachel at age 9. In normal development, when both are 13, you can't tell which one learned first. The 5-year spread means nothing at all. But in school, I label Rachel learning disabled and slow David down a bit too. For a paycheck, I adjust David to depend on me to tell him when to go and stop. He won't outgrow that dependency. I identify Rachel as discount merchandise, special education fodder. She'll be locked in her place forever.
Zizek, welcome to How the Light Gets In.
It's an honor for me to be here.
In an age where many say ChatGPT can now outsmart humans, where science is often worshipped as the basis of knowledge and an advancement in behaviour is studied under psychology, what's the point of philosophy and how should we think about the role of philosophy today?
As I always repeat, I don't think philosophy can provide big answers. What philosophers can do, and I agree here even with real scientists like yesterday Carlo Rovelli, who was here. You know, scientists often operate with a set of inherited traditional concepts. For example, precisely with quantum physics. What does it mean for our notion of time, of movement, and so on? Here, philosophy enters. Or in ecology. Yeah, abstractly we all admit we are in deep shit, blah, blah, with nature. But the task of philosophy is to raise the question, to what extent is the way we formulate a problem part of the problem? What, for me, truly dialectical, leftist, whatever, philosopher would say to ecology is, let's see, because you never perceive a crisis in a general way. Let's see concretely, and you immediately see, with a conservative ecologist who think, let's return to old local communities and so on. We have state ecologists. They were very popular in East Germany, Soviet Union. We need a well-organized, almost totalitarian planned state. It didn't work. We have capitalist ecologists, even some leftists, who claim you can simply regulate it by taxing more products and so on, all that. So as a philosopher, my point is not some divine Platonic ideas, but very practical orientation. Okay, you are saying this. What does it mean in practice? Here things may get me into trouble, but especially, for example, with regard to feminism. I think I can say this honestly, with all my bad jokes. Totally pro-feminist, but I always suspected that what we vaguely identify as woke or cancel culture and so on, that there is something even upper middle class in it, and that the secret target are ordinary people. I know in United States, in a typical discourse at a university, they, of course, their secret target is, but you know, Hispanics, how they treat women. No, for me, struggle for, I always like to use this example. What I didn't like at Me Too is, do you remember when it began to explode in public? It was focused usually on one scene. At a party or in a pub, you men try to pick up a woman, and when do you exert pressure on her? When do you go too far? And my argument, and so many women accepted joyfully this, is, listen, okay, but for me, the tragedy is not if you are a rising movie star and the producer tells you, go to bed with me, otherwise you don't get the role. Okay, it can hurt your career, but isn't it the true horror? You know who said this once publicly? Your leftist actress, Kirsten Stewart. She said, but why just the two of them, producer and actor? Look around. Imagine their ordinary cleaning ladies, secretaries, and so on. Imagine a woman. That's my, you are in early 30s. From a male chauvinist standpoint, you are, I'm sorry to say this, it's not I prefer older women, but in the dirty sense. But you are losing your attraction. You have a husband who doesn't hate you, but more and more ignores you. And then, of course, it's this silent agreement. You have to do a lot of job at home. And You don't love him, he doesn't love you, but since he earns at least more money, if you have 2 children, what hope is there for you?
Terrifying clown or some strange Santa at the mall, right? Yeah, not pretty. That child probably immediately reached for a parent looking for comfort, and that same kid might freak out if she was separated from her adult of choice, especially if she was in an unfamiliar environment. It's called attachment, and if you've ever seen a clingy kid, you know why it's called that. They attach. For a long time, psychologists assumed that this was just an intense, innate survival instinct. I mean, it makes sense that babies would be attached to their food source, and bigger kids would stick around the people who helped them survive. But in the 1950s, American psychologists Harry and Margaret Harlow came along with a barrel of monkeys, complicating and illuminating our idea of bonding with caregivers in what has to be one of the saddest psychological experiments of all time. The Harlows were breeding rhesus macaque monkeys for their research on learning. Part of the process involved separating babies from their mothers right after birth, which, yeah, pretty cruel already. They began noticing the baby monkeys were very attached to the blankets they had in their cages, so they set up an experiment. They created 2 artificial mothers. One was a bare wire cylinder with a feeding bottle attached, they called that wire mother, and the other was a cozier cloth and foam wrapped cylinder without a feeding bottle. Cloth mother. It took no time at all to see the baby's preference. They overwhelmingly preferred the comfy cloth mama, clinging to it whenever they seemed to be anxious or in need of comfort. And sometimes they fed from the wire mother with the baby bottle while standing on the cloth one. This discovery that attachment wasn't just about getting breakfast surprised a lot of people. It turns out that contact and touch are vital to attachment, learning, emotional well-being, and psychological development. As the brain and mind develop in infants, so too do their emotions and social behavior. Caregivers can greatly influence this development, and most psychologists will tell you that how a child is raised early on can have a huge effect on how they view the world, other people, and themselves, not to mention how they react to stressful situations or sort out moral dilemmas. I mean, it's a big, complex, challenging world out there, and wire monkey baby mama just ain't gonna cut it.
This will be a long and complicated speech, so if anyone wants a bathroom pass, ask now. I think you're all very special people, and I feel honored to be here tonight at your 6th annual convention. If there's anywhere in this country that leadership for the changes that we need in schooling will come, I think it will come from the people who are doing what you're doing. You're the 16th state that I've seen homeschooling in firsthand, and I have not seen a bad job being done. My wife said to tell you that you don't have to agree with everything I'm going to say here, as she doesn't either. And she warned me not to tell any Puget Sound jokes, so I won't, because I don't know any Puget Sound jokes. I can't tell you anything about homeschooling, obviously, that you don't already know. So my talk tonight will mainly be about the schooling you missed when you decided to homeschool. About those places I know a great deal. I think a good purpose would be served first, however, by telling you a bit about myself. And I have an ulterior motive in this other than self-expression. I've worked as a New York City school teacher for 26 years, some of that time teaching the elite children from Manhattan's Upper West Side between Lincoln Center, where the opera is, and Columbia University, where the defense contracts are, and in recent years teaching children from Harlem and Spanish Harlem, whose lives are shaped by the dangerous undercurrents of the industrial city in decay. My present job is in the shadow of the largest Gothic cathedral in the United States, St. John the Divine, and not a very long walk from the famous Museum of Natural History and the equally famous Metropolitan Museum. I say those things because I know that a few of you daring souls have been to New York City, and you probably stopped at those places, and now you can locate me instead of a talking head as somebody who's between those 2 points. About 3 blocks from my school is the spot where the Central Park jogger was raped and brutally beaten a few years ago, and 7 of the 9 attackers had gone to my school. Last June, 4 people were murdered in or around my school building. 2 of them I think you probably read about out here in Tacoma. 2 students from a few doors away from where I taught saw a television show about kids who murdered their parents for insurance money, And so these kids murdered their parents who didn't have any insurance money. I'm the union chapter chairman in the building, and when I found out about that, I went around to see how many teachers actually knew that the headline in the New York papers, and I'm sure in the national press, had taken place in our building, and almost nobody did. That would give you some idea how fragmented the staff is in the building. However, as I was going around and asking how many people knew about those two murders, I heard about a third murder that had taken place on our playground a week earlier that I knew nothing about, and a fourth murder that had taken place in our after-school center 3 or 4 days earlier that I hadn't heard about either. And at that point, I stopped asking people because I already knew what I needed to know.
So at the beginning, you said that the role of philosophy, or part of the role, is to deconstruct the way we think.
I don't like this term, but I get what you want.
Yes, deconstruct the way we think.
Not a deconstruct.
No, you're not a deconstruct. I won't accuse you of that. But it's to find the problems with what we think. But you can keep finding problems that exist all the way down to the point at which you're not really saying anything, or you can't say anything concrete. So how does your understanding of philosophy evolve in life?
Be more precise. What we have to do is, like, we all agree, not all. There are people like Trump and so on who deny ecological crisis. But most of us hypocritically even agree there is an ecological crisis. The role of a philosopher is not this reduction, because then you have to do the other way also. This daily practices, how women are treated, do they do the homework and so on. It's again, and I will now hypocritically rely on a high authority, which will not be the guy who was here, Corbett, but my good friend Alvaro Garcia Linera, the ex-Morales vice president. The whole success of the rule of Morales was that they discovered that this standard Marxist focus on working class exploited no longer works in our countries. If you have a good position, they're disappearing, permanent job at the factory, okay, formally you are exploited, blah, blah, but nonetheless, you have a certain level of life, you know you will be retired, you will get something, elementary healthcare and so on. It's almost privileged to have this today. The big problem of working class today for me is not just Frederick Jameson, my Justice's good friend, had this, that we should also talk about ecological exploitation, like what is happening with new forms of mining, where you don't exploit any person, you just ruin their environment. No, it happens with Inuits in Canada, in Peru, and so on. So this form of exploitation, then the unpaid implicit, it's not women in the strict Marxist sense who stays at home, does the work. They are not exploited in the formal sense. Exploitation means the capitalist own the means of production, but their unpaid work is crucial for the system. Without their unpaid work, the system wouldn't function. And my mega example is, this is where I, up to a point, agree with the guy who is, I think, already crawling around here. This means if I talk like this of him, that he's my friend, Yanis Varoufakis, no? That precarious work. And then these agencies, the new feudal agencies like Uber and so on, who they claim we don't exploit anyone. If you are Uber driver, you own your means of production. We just bring together the two sides. You know, people who want what you are offering and you know what's so ingenious here? That the ideology is, even an Uber driver, he is a small capitalist. You know, we are all small capitalists, and here they misuse terribly the term of freedom. You are free. You can stay off just when you want. So you are given false freedom. At the same time, I like this. You don't perceive the company as your competitor, but other drivers. So you know, it's as if there is a struggle among workers themselves. This is the most ingenious invention of today's capitalism. It's more brutal uncertainty exploitation, but in a form of freedom. Like, as a guy who believes in this, explain to me. Let's say you have $5,000 and you can freely decide. Will you go to a holiday? Will you put it into education of your son? Will you whatever? You know, this ideology of we are all small capitalists. So it's that's my lesson. It's very important in a complex social situation, which form do you put forward as the, sorry for this old-fashioned, almost Stalinist term, as the typical one. You know where it was wonderful ideological operation here? You are too young to remember when Thatcher was followed by John Major. You remember all of a sudden when financial crisis, so-called, began, one specific figure was elevated into what I call in Hegelian terms concrete universality, a particular case which embodied what conservatives embody. Young, unmarried mother, woman. There is violence among the young people, yeah, because she is not married, cannot control the child. People are on drugs, yes, because she didn't control them, and so on. All of a sudden, this figure of a young, unmarried mother became the symbol of all that is wrong.
If you've had that feeling like your life doesn't belong to you, something is off, maybe the choices, the emotions, even the arguments in your head aren't really yours, that is not you being paranoid at all. That is the program running. And the crazy part about all of this is it didn't start with your phone. It didn't start with TikTok. It started well over 100 years ago in a quiet office with men in suits mapping out the human mind like a machine that they could rewire. But here's what almost nobody understands. There is a reason that outrage feels addictive. There's a reason that despair feels normal. There's a reason that you wake up with dread and blame yourself for it. It was designed. And the moment you see how, you can't unsee it.
From the beginning, there was purpose behind forced schooling. Purpose which had nothing to do with what parents, kids, or communities wanted. Instead, this grand purpose was forged out of what a highly centralized corporate economy and system of finance bent on internationalizing itself was thought to need. That, and what a strong centralized political state needed too. School was looked upon from the first decade of the 20th century as a branch of industry and a tool of governance. For a considerable time, probably provoked by a climate of official anger and contempt directed against immigrants, social managers of schooling were remarkably candid about what they were doing. In a speech he gave before businessmen prior to the First World War, Woodrow Wilson made this unabashed disclosure. We want one class to have a liberal education. We want another class, a very much larger class of necessity, to forego the privilege of a liberal education and fit themselves to perform specific, difficult, manual tasks. By 1917, the major administrative jobs in American schooling were under the control of a group referred to in the press of that day as the Education Trust. The first meeting of this trust included representatives of Rockefeller, Carnegie, Harvard, Stanford, the University of Chicago, and the National Education Association. The chief end, wrote Benjamin Kidd in 1918, was to, quote, impose on the young the ideal of subordination. At first, the primary target was the tradition of independent livelihoods in America. Unless Yankee entrepreneurialism could be extinguished, at least among the common population, the immense capital investments that mass production industry required for equipment weren't conceivably justifiable. Students were to learn to think of themselves as employees,
competing for the favor of management, not as Franklin or Edison had once regarded themselves, as self-determined, free agents. Only by a massive psychological campaign could the menace of overproduction in America be contained. That's what important men and academics called it. The ability of Americans to think as independent producers had to be curtailed. Certain writings of Alexander Inglis carry a hint of schooling's role in this ultimately successful project to curb the tendency of little people to compete with big companies. From 1880 to 1930, overproduction became a controlling metaphor among the managerial classes, and this idea would have a profound influence on the development of mass schooling. I know how difficult it is for most of us who mow our lawns and walk our dogs to comprehend that long-range social engineering even exists, let alone that it began to dominate compulsion schooling nearly a century ago. Yet, the 1934 edition of Elwood P. Cubberley's Public Education in the United States is explicit about what happened and why. It has come to be desirable that children should not engage in productive labor. On the contrary, all recent thinking is opposed to their doing so. Both the interests of organized labor and the interest of the nation have set against child labor. The statement occurs in a section of public education called A New Lengthening of the Period of Dependence, in which Cubberley explains that the coming of the factory system has made extended childhood necessary by depriving children of training and education that farm and village life once gave. With the breakdown of home and village industries, the passing of chores, and the extinction of the apprenticeship system by large-scale production with its extreme division of labor, an army of workers has arisen, said Cubberley, who know nothing.
This is, I think, most that philosophy can and should do.
We've talked about the role of philosophy in politics, but I want to talk a little bit about the role of philosophy in science. So you've recently taken part in panels with people like Roger Penrose, Sean Carroll, Lee Smolin.
Roger Penrose was a total failure, unfortunately, because we simply, and it's my guilt, by they have been Sabine Hosenfelder and Roger Penrose, they were narrowly in their space. And I brutally attacked them with my generalities.
So the problem is, without God, can we think, is it possible to think reality as in itself ontologically simply incomplete, not fully structured?
But I agree. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, it's fine. But more recently, Carlo Rovelli. I'm just wondering why...
as you could see yesterday, there is instant love, you know that.
What have you learnt from those debates, or what are you seeking to...
A lot.
And what are you seeking maybe to teach people, if you are?
No, I'm not that arrogant philosopher who knows better than themselves what and so on. Up to a point, I can do what Rovelli himself admits. Rovelli knows, with all his good colleagues, Lee Smolin, which is the political terms, partner, lover, significant other, Francesca Vidotto, and so on, they are aware that the time of Copenhagen orthodoxy is over. Copenhagen orthodoxy meant don't even think about ontological questions, shut up and calculate, you know. But today it became necessary to raise the question, what is the status of wave function? And at this point, the worst kind of philosophy enters. Many scientists, I don't criticize them for what they are doing, but for how often they adopt the worst vulgar philosophy. Like you have many quantum physicists who claim that was what Carlo was attacking yesterday. Observation only constitutes reality, so we are back in subject. That's one point. Second, much more important point is the basic philosophical one. I try to remain a materialist, but I think that to really account for human subjectivity, you cannot do it within the frame of this old notion of materialism, which is very primitive one. Empty space and look, small balls of matter fly there. Here, I think, quantum physics does it, and most important, I think that if you apply the model, basic model, I simplify to the utmost, of quantum mechanics, which is this idea of superpositions of states, and then collapse, which is a contingent collapse, and attached with this the notion of hologram, which means at every moment, after we have a collapse, other alternatives don't simply disappear, but they are retroactively constructed as part of a new narrative, this idea of changing the past, not magically. What happened, happened, but part of this is what we should apply today to history. With all my respect for Marx, where I'm critical of Marx is that there still is very strongly present a kind of progressive evolution or teleology, like he is open, we may screw it up, but basically history is moving towards socialism, communism, whatever you say, no? And it's not even enough what Rosa Luxemburg said. Everybody likes the future will be socialism or barbarism. No, Stalin proves that it can be both at the same time. No, sorry, to go back. We are today in a situation where precisely in a situation of superpositions. It's an open situation. Maybe a new barbarism will prevail, where there will be islands of relative safety, and in other parts of the world, what happens now, I know very well the situation, it may surprise you, in Democratic Republic of Congo, and not so much Rwanda, but Sudan, not the South. Society is in decay there. So I think that we cannot rely on any higher historical necessity. We live in an open situation. It's up to us. History is not predetermined.
As a 42-year-old who's spent most of my life studying physics, I must admit that I had a big misconception. I believed that every object has one single trajectory through space, one single path. But in this video, I will prove to you that this is not the case. Everything is actually exploring all possible paths all at once. So let's start with a simple thought experiment. Say you're at a beach when all of a sudden you see your friend struggling out in the water. You want to go help him as quickly as possible, so which path should you take to get there? The shortest path is a straight line, so you could head directly towards him, but you can run faster than you can swim, and this path requires more swimming. So alternatively, you could run down the beach to minimize the distance through the water. But now the total distance is longer than it needs to be. So the optimal path, it turns out, is somewhere in between. To be precise, it depends on the speeds at which you can run and swim. Now, you might recognize this mathematical relationship because it is the exact same law that governs light passing from one medium into another. So light also takes the fastest path from point A to point B. What's weird about this is that as humans, we can see where we want to go and then figure out the fastest route. But light? How does light know how to travel to minimize its journey time? Now, here is where my misconception comes in. I shine a laser beam. The light just goes in one direction. I throw a ball. The ball just goes in one direction. I would have answered, there is nothing strange about this. Light sets off from point A in some direction, and then a little while later, it encounters a new medium. And due to local interactions with that medium, it changes direction, ending up at point B. If you later find that of all the possible paths, light took the shortest time to get from A to B, I wouldn't think it was optimizing for anything. I would just think that's what happens when light obeys local rules. But now I will prove to you that light doesn't set out in only one direction. Instead, it really does explore all possible paths. And the same is true for electrons and protons, all quantum particles. So the fact that we see things on single, well-defined trajectories is, in a way, the most convincing illusion nature has ever devised. And the way it works all comes down to a quantity known as the action. In a previous video, we showed how an obscure scientist, Maupertuis, made an ad hoc proposal that there should be a quantity called action, which he defined as mass times velocity times distance. and he claimed that everything always follows the path that minimizes the action. Hamilton later showed that this action is equivalent to the integral over time of kinetic energy minus potential energy. Action was useful and an alternative way of solving physics problems, especially when Newton's laws get too cumbersome. But then, around the turn of the 20th century, action showed up at the heart of a scientific revolution, the birth of quantum mechanics. It all started with electric lighting in Germany. This is a video about things, like cars, phones, and light bulbs, and an actual conspiracy that made them worse.
Think about what it's like in the 1890s, right? Electricity being more widely available, at least in urban centers, and things like, light bulbs. They were new. They were literally the hot new thing.
Germany wanted to replace all their gas streetlights with electric light bulbs. So an important question was, how do you maximize the visible light given off by a hot filament? Scientists at a German research institute, the PTR, studied how much light different materials emitted as a function of temperature. I am outside Livermore Fire Station number 6, and in here they have the longest continuously on light bulb in the world. It has been on for 120 years, since 1901. There it is, huh? It's not even connected to a light switch, but it does have a backup battery and generator. So the big question is, how has this light bulb lasted so long? It was manufactured by hand not long after commercial light bulbs were first invented. And yet, it has been running for over 1 million hours, way longer than any light bulb today is meant to last. At low temperatures, each material gave off its own characteristic spectrum, mostly in the infrared. But above about 500 degrees Celsius, all materials started to glow in the same way, with an almost identical distribution of light. The hotter the object, the more energy was emitted at every wavelength, and the peak of the distribution shifted to the left. A while back, a friend of mine told me this story, that someone had invented a light bulb that would last forever, years ago, but they never sold it because an everlasting light bulb makes for a terrible business model. I mean, you would never have any repeat customers, and eventually you would run out of people to sell light bulbs to. I thought this story sounded ridiculous. If you could make an everlasting light bulb, then everyone would buy your light bulb over the competitors. And so you could charge really high prices, make a lot of money, even if demand would eventually dry up. I just couldn't imagine that we had better light bulbs in the past and then intentionally made them worse. But it turns out I was wrong. At least, sort of.
But they still didn't understand how it worked theoretically. So that was sort of the next step. Right? So if you can understand how it works theoretically, then you can use that theory to potentially design your product.
They started by imagining the simplest object possible, one that would absorb all light that falls onto it and perfectly emit radiation based on its temperature. They came up with a hole in a metal cube.
Inventing a viable electric light was hard. I mean, this is the typical incandescent design, which just involves passing electric current through a material, making it so hot that it glows. Less than 5% of the electrical energy comes out as light. The other 95% is released as heat. So these are really heat bulbs, which give off a little bit of light as a byproduct. The temperature of the filament can get up to 2800 Kelvin. That is half as hot as the surface of the sun. At temperatures like those, most materials melt, and if they don't melt, they burn. Which is why in the 1840s, Warren de la Rue came up with the idea of putting the filament in a vacuum bulb, so there's no oxygen to react with.
By 1879, Thomas Edison had made a bulb with a cotton thread filament that lasted 14 hours. Other inventors created bulbs with platinum filaments or other carbonized materials, and gradually the lifespan of bulbs increased. The filaments changed from carbon to tungsten, which has a very high melting point, and by the early 1920s, average bulb lifetimes were approaching 2,000 hours, with some lasting 2,500 hours. But this is when lifetimes stopped getting longer and started getting shorter.
We are living through strange days. Across Britain, Europe and America, societies have become split and polarized, not just in politics, but across the whole culture. there is anger at the inequality and the ever-growing corruption, and a widespread distrust of the elites. Yet at the same time, there is a paralysis, a sense that no one knows how to escape from this. Even in America, where there is now hope with the new president, there are also fears that despite the growing crisis, the system will just return to normal. We live in a strange time. Extraordinary events keep happening that undermine the stability of our world. Suicide bombs, waves of refugees, Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, even Brexit. Yet those in control seem unable to deal with them. And no one has any vision of a different or a better kind of future. This film will tell the story of how we got to this strange place. It is about how over the past 40 years, politicians, financiers and technological utopians, rather than face up to the real complexities of the world, retreated. Instead, they constructed a simpler version of the world in order to hang on to power. And as this fake world grew, all of us went along with it, because the simplicity was reassuring. Even those who thought they were attacking the system, the radicals, the artists, the musicians, and our whole counterculture, actually became part of the trickery. Because they too had retreated into the make-believe world. Which is why their opposition has no effect, and nothing ever changes.
It's not only our reality which enslaves us. The tragedy of our predicament when we are within ideology is that when we think that we escape it into our dreams, at that point we are within ideology.
He hated it. So he wanted this
100 years ago, a new theory about human nature was put forward by Sigmund Freud. He had discovered, he said, primitive sexual and aggressive forces hidden deep inside the minds of all human beings. Forces which, if not controlled, led individuals and societies to chaos and destruction.
Once they cracked all of these things open that they did there, the experiment never ended.
Made of a 50% decline among the most rarefied group of test takers, those who score above 750. In 1972, there were 2,817 American students who reached this pinnacle. Only 1,438 did in 1994, when kids took a much easier test. Can a 50% decline occur in 22 years without signaling that some massive leveling in the public school mind is underway? In a real sense, where your own child is concerned, you might best forget scores on these tests entirely as a reliable measure of what they purport to assess. I wouldn't deny that mass movements in these scores in one direction or another indicate something is going on. And since the correlation between success in schooling and success on these tests is close, then significant score shifts are certainly measuring changes in understanding.
So how does Obama get the money then to do those kinds of things for those policies that you disagree with? Where does that money come from?
Well, it comes from you and I, everybody else. If you didn't like his policies, you wouldn't have voted for him. If there wasn't certain things that, led you to go out and vote for him, then you wouldn't have done it.
So what do you think it says when the government is able to spend your tax dollars on things that you disagree with?
I don't really shun it. I mean, you gotta kind of spread out everybody's money to everything, whether or not you support it or not.
How does the government actually achieve that, of the spreading of the money?
I'm not sure about that.
I mean, you'd want to know if this is like an important thing and you're willing to support someone in the White House who's carrying out all these policies and is responsible for all this destructive foreign policy. Wouldn't you want to know where that money comes from? Like how the government gets money in the first place? Because it comes from somewhere, right?
All of us. He's going to get all the money from all of us. But as far as the distribution goes, sometimes there's a simple ignorant bliss about it that all of the American people look to.
Would you say that you're in that ignorant bliss?
I would say a lot of people are.
Are you?
Am I? I think I am. I think there's a good chunk of us all right here that are standing out here.
And you think it's true that ignorance is bliss?
Sometimes, yeah. It's better off not to know.
That's kind of a scary proposition. I mean, you know, the government is like, it's really dangerous. Like, it ends up actually like hurting lots of people. You bury your head in the sand and say, I'm just going to be an Obama supporter.
Between 1960 and 1998, the non-teaching bureaucracy of public schools grew 500%. But oversight was concentrated into fewer and fewer hands.
Let him ask his question.
So this is a dovetail.
Don't stand for this. Right? You're sitting here like cattle. You have questions. You confront them. They don't want to do it in public.
Okay,
Hey, this is America. This is not a CNN political debate. You're managing. You don't really want it. Hey, that's right. Parents, you need to question these people. Do the research. It's online. Top 10.
Okay, so the next question. The next question to our panel. The next question to our panel is Dr. Lowry.
The 40,520 school districts with elected boards this nation had in 1960 shriveled to 15,000 by 1998. On the college rung of the school ladder, between 1960 and 1984, the quality of undergraduate education at America's 50 best-known colleges and universities altered substantially. According to a 1996 report by the National Association of Scholars, these schools stopped providing broad and rigorous exposure to major areas of knowledge for the average student.
You're talking about the predetermination of history. In 1989, you said the ideology of progress is the greatest obstacle to truly progressing. And more recently, you wrote a series of essays called Against Progress. What's the problem that you have with progress?
At a couple of levels. First, I think progress is not a global notion. You absolutely should avoid this idea, stones, minerals, crystals, plants, animals, then humans. No, I'm not saying these narratives are wrong. I'm saying that they are constructed always retroactively. When one orientation wins, it rewrites history. Marx is here ambiguous, but at some point in Grundrisse, he is on the right track. When he said that, this sounds very teleological, that the anatomy of a man is key to the anatomy of the ape. No, this doesn't mean man was the natural goal of development. He meant quite by chance, out of apes or whoever, humans developed. And once we are humans, the past appears to us as progressive. Marx says the same about capitalism. It offers us a clue of all past history, but he is very clear. He says, but the fact that capitalism happened in Europe, etc., it could not have happened, and you would have a totally different story, and so on. I like this idea of how, and since I'm still a shitty male chauvinist romantic, my favorite example here is love. How it's a little bit like love, you walk on the street, you sleep on a banana, a lady helps you, maybe it's the love of your life. And then, of course, you retroactively reconstructed, everything was predestined, all the life I was waiting to meet you. Yes, you should say this, once it happens. And that's for me also the deepest aspect of Hegelian dialectics. It's not that everything is necessary, it's that in a complex situation, when one tendency wins, it establishes itself as necessary. Necessity is always a contingent category. What in a certain situation prevails as a necessity is contingent. Whom I like here? He is very, quote, close to quantum physics. The guy who unfortunately died, David Graeber.
That are programmed by culture that can be completely at odds with our genomes. And it leads to misunderstandings of evolution, like the idea that religious belief is a mind virus, that effectively these belief structures are parasitizing human beings, and they are wasting the time and effort that those human beings are spending on that endeavor, rather than the more reasonable interpretation, which is that these belief systems have flourished because they have facilitated the interests of the creatures involved. Our belief systems are built around evolutionary success, and they certainly contain human benevolence, which is appropriate to phases of history when there is abundance and people can afford to be good to each other. The problem is if you have grown up in a period in which abundance has been the standard state, you don't anticipate the way people change in the face of austerity. And so what we are currently seeing is messages that we have all agreed are unacceptable re-emerging because the signals that we have reached the end of the boom times, those signals are everywhere. And so people are triggered to move into a phase that they don't even know that they have.
Lord Keynes, welcome, sir. It's a pleasure.
Pleasure's all mine.
Your agenda.
That won't be necessary. I am the agenda. Tell them I've arrived.
And then tell them I've arrived.
And your name is?
Hayek? F.A. Hayek. With an H.
Freddie.
Keynes.
Hey, listen, party at the Fed.
Already?
20 minutes.
Lobby. John Maynard Keynes.
F.A. Hayek.
Yeah, we're opposed.
We oppose each other philosophically.
In the same studio.
We've been going back and forth for a century.
I want to steer markets.
I want them set free. There's a boom and bust cycle and good reason to fear it. Play low interest rates.
It's the animal spirits. John Maynard Keynes wrote the book on modern macro. The man you need when the economy's off track. Depression, recession, now your question's in session. Have a seat and I'll school you in one simple lesson. Boom, 1929, the big crash. We didn't bounce back, economy's in the trash. Persistent unemployment, the result of sticky wages. Waiting for recovery? That's outrageous. I had a real plan, any fool can understand. The advice real simple, boost aggregate demand. C-I-G altogether gets to Y. Keep that total growing, watch the economy fly.
We've been going back and forth for a century.
I want to steer markets.
I want them set free. There's a boom and bust cycle and good reason to fear it. Play low interest rates.
It's the animal spirit.
How do you think he will rank in the history of economic theory or thought?
As a man with a great many ideas who knew very little economics. And that's literally true. So he knew nothing but Marshallian economics. He was completely unaware of what was going on elsewhere. He even knew very little about 19th century economic history. His interests were very largely guided by aesthetic appeal. And he hated the 19th century, and therefore knew very little about it. Even about its scientific literature. He was a really great expert in the Elizabethan age.
I'm absolutely astounded that you say that John Maynard Keynes really didn't know the economic literature. He had surely gone through.
Even within the English tradition, he did know very little of the great monetary writers of the 19th century. He would know nothing about Henry Thornton. He knew a little about Ricardo, of course, the famous things. But he could have found any number of antecedents of his inflationary ideas in the 1820s and 1830s. And when I told him about it, it was all new to him.
How did he react? Was he sheepish?
No, not in the least. He was much too self-assured and
amused,
convinced that what other people could have said about the subject was not frightfully important. When at the end, well, not in the end, there was a period just after he'd written the general theory where he was so convinced he'd redone the whole science that he was rather contemptuous of anything which had been done before.
And did he maintain that confidence to the end?
I can't say, because I said before, we'd almost stopped talking economics. A great many other subjects, general history of ideas and so on, we were interested. And, you know, I don't want you to get the impression that I underestimated him as a brain. He was one of the most intelligent and most original thinkers I have known. But economics was just a sideline for him.
Ladies and gentlemen, members of the committee, we are here today to consider the impact of government spending on our economy. We're fortunate to have two world-renowned economists to offer their testimony on the matter.
I see you took a detour down the road to serfdom.
Talk about the end of laissez-faire. Sheesh.
Well, shake it off, Freddie. I'm not pulling any punches in there.
I'm ready. Are you?
Prepare for the return of the master.
John Maynard Keynes. F.A. Hayek. Round 2. Round 2.0. Same economists, same beliefs. New microphones. New mustaches.
Here we are, peace out, Great Recession. Thanks to me, as you see, we're not in a depression. Recovery, destiny, if you follow my lesson. Lord Keynes, here I come, line up for the procession.
We brought out the shovels and we're still in a ditch and still digging. Don't you think it's time for a switch from that hair of the dog? Friend, the party is over. The long run is here. It's time to get sober.
Are you kidding? My cure works perfectly fine. Have a look, the Great Recession ended back in '09. I deserve credit, things would have been worse. All the estimates prove it, I'll quote chapter and verse.
Econometricians, they're ever so biased. Are they doing real science or confirming their bias? Their Keynesian models are tidy and neat, but that top-down approach is a fatal conceit.
Which way should we choose? More bottom up or more top down? The fight continues. Keynes and Hayek second round. It's time to win. More from the top or from the ground. Let's listen to the great say. Keynes and Hayek throwing down.
We could have done better.
Officially, Tavistock was about treating shell shock. This is what they used to call PTSD. It was trauma therapy. It was a beautiful cover story. But what they actually found, trauma doesn't just break people, it softens them up, makes them pliable. They were not fixing soldiers like they told everybody. They were testing civilians. They were running war psychology on entire populations. Grief, confusion, and fear. Tavistock used all of these things like tools in a toolbox. Once you know which lever makes a herd turn into a stampede, you don't need speeches or ballots anymore. You just pull the lever. So after World War II, Tavistock moves into media and education and government. Its fingerprints are on NATO, PSYOPs, Cold War propaganda, and the actual birth of mass advertising. Then this guy comes on the scene a little later. His name is Edward Bernays, and he's actually Sigmund Freud's nephew, which is super weird. But instead of analyzing dreams and stuff like that, he turned the unconscious into a marketplace. And Edward Bernays is the reason that women smoked in public.
Up until the time of Prohibition, it was not considered good manners to get drunk at a party, get drunk any place. But after Prohibition, that was a kind of dare. And everybody got drunk, and it was how drunk you got that was whether you had a good time.
There was just no end to dances. You could go all the time, night after night. It was about 1924, 25, and when my friend, the lady friend that was with me, lit up a cigarette, everybody in the place looked at her. It just wasn't done to smoke out in public.
It wasn't considered the nice thing to do at all, you know. And then along came our generation, and we all wanted to smoke, particularly because it wasn't considered the nice thing to do, I guess.
This series is about how those in power have used Freud's theories to try and control the dangerous crowd in an age of mass democracy. At the heart of the story is not just Sigmund Freud, but other members of the Freud family. This episode is about Freud's American nephew, Edward Bernays. Bernays is almost completely unknown today, but his influence on the 20th century was nearly as great as his uncle's. Because Bernays was the first person to take Freud's ideas about human beings and use them to manipulate the masses. He showed American corporations for the first time how they could make people want things they didn't need by linking mass-produced goods to their unconscious desires. Out of this would come a new political idea of how to control the masses. By satisfying people's inner selfish desires, one made them happy and thus docile. It was the start of the all-consuming self, which has come to dominate our world today.
His famous analysis, for example, of Inca society. How they said it's not just this sacrificing children, brutality. No, there was also a totally opposite, much more in our terms, democratic tendency. And this is my idea about, going back nonetheless to your question, about progress. Always, we should be obsessed by this. Always raise the question, who paid the price of the progress? This brings me back even with your, I think you mentioned this before, artificial intelligence and so on. It's a mega great thing. But look what is already happening. And I'm not saying it's necessarily a catastrophe. Do you know that all around the world they are measuring IQ? And I don't want to enter into this problem. I know it's real. Are there implicitly racist criteria? The point is just that they are measuring it all the time in the same way. Do you know that according to all data from India, South Africa, United States, till 2010, the average IQ was slightly getting up. After 2010, we are getting more and more stupid. Why? And here is the danger that I see. It's at the same time an incredible plasticity and so on, but you know the joke, everybody knows it, that I used what would be ideal sex today. It would be a lady, sorry, none of you, I don't want to insult you. We have a date, we say yes, we will do it, but what happens? I come, you come with your plastic electric dildo, I come with the plastic vagina, both, and what we do is, that's for me ideal sex today. We sit down, you put your dildo into my vagina, we reconnect them, and they are buzzing. And we can say, wonderful, the machine is doing sex, we can now have a nice chat, drink tea. Even doing today, it's horrible what is happening in academia. You have all these free access journals, but you know how they function. Already some people suspect the majority of texts are written by ChatGPT. Then, many of these journals use they fake reviewers, use ChatGPT to review the text, and then the so-called readers, quite a lot of them, use ChatGPT to read the review and give you a one-page summary or whatever. So all the machine is working, we are out. Now, does this simply mean maybe it's not bad? We can reflect, do nice things, listen to music. No, because the other side of this machines are doing is that machines are also including us. Like my real fear, I wrote a book on it, is what Elon Musk calls Neuralink, but Zuckerberg is also doing it. This frightens me. Maybe it will not be so bad. Just know, this idea of a direct link between not just my brain, the flow of my thoughts, and the digital machine. This means that the one who controls the machine can, up to a point, literally control my thinking, implant it, and so on.
Well, she talks to all the servants about man and God and law. And everybody says she's the brains behind ball. She's 68, but she says she's 24. I ain't gonna work for. Nah, I ain't gonna work for Maggie's mom no more. I ain't gonna work on Maggie's farm no more. No, I ain't gonna work on Maggie's farm no more. Well, I try my best to be just like I am, but everybody wants you.
party to get drunk any place. But after Prohibition, that was a kind of dare. And everybody got drunk. It was how drunk you got, or whether you had a good time.
Always going into the speakeasy, I always took a bottle of liquor along that was given to me by a bootlegger, and I would put it up my sleeve. I had big belt sleeves on the fur coat, and I would stick it up my sleeve,